Good morning. Beautiful sunrise today. It appears to be clear. Famous words if you've watched movies. Alrighty. We're going to continue with Donna Gray. Donna Gray lives with her husband on a small ranch near Prairie, Montana, in the heart of Paradise Valley, between the Absaroka and Galantine ranges. Midwestern by birth, Donna is a Montanan by choice. Montanan by choice. Her interviews with Montana ranch women, her neighbors, were tape recorded, and the stories shaped after listening to them for the cadences of speech and for the bright images and details. These ranch women kept house. Over 50 years ago, without exception, every woman I approached felt that her life had not been of particular interest, that there was really nothing to tell. Oh, so beautiful. Just a little bit. There we go. Got a little jiggle going on this morning. All right. Portions of these stories were performed in a Reader's Theater presentation titled Four Women from Prairie in Livingston, Montana in 1989, 1990, and 1991. Oh my Lord, it's beautiful. Here with the naked eye, it is hot pink and purple. But on the camera, it's got a lot of orange in it. Thanks again for being with me. You know I appreciate you. All right, we are on page 298, which is approximately midway through this book, and this will be video number 24, so we got a few to go, my friends. All right. Oral Histories of Ranch Women by Donna Gray from 1997. Irma DeLong Taylor. Irma DeLong Taylor was born in North Dakota in 1911. Her parents and her mother's family, the Geers, Geers, were to become part of Montana's great homestead saga. When she speaks of these years, 1915 through 1919, it is sometimes with sadness, but also with nostalgia, pride, triumph. Given a great deal of responsibility for her age, she told me that by the age of 10 and a half, she baked and cooked for her family. She asked some other girls one day, "How many of you can dress a chicken from the feathers out, cut it up, and have a meal on the table at night?" They could. None of them say it, of course. In 1915, when she was 3 and a half, Irma traveled with her parents, John and Delata DeLong, and her older sister, in a covered wagon from their home in Mott, North Dakota, to Colorado. The covered wagon was built and outfitted by John, a carpenter by trade. It looked like all the pictures of covered wagons. It had bows up over the top with canvas. It was certainly waterproof and had that little puckering string that we'd peek out and watch the scenery as we'd gone past it. John, built the cupboards It was all cupboards on the inside. They were along the side, had doors on them, but things wouldn't rattle out. Some were shelving, part drawers. They wouldn't rattle. Some were shelving, part drawers. Everything had to have a door on it. On the outside, he built shelves to carry the barrels of water and feed for the horses. In the cupboards, there were cans of descriptions for size, according to the food that was in them. You could put 50 pounds of flour in one of those cans. They nearly always bought flour in the 50s, sugar in 25. She, Lotta, had an old-fashioned Dutch oven. It had 3 little legs, a lid, and a handle to pick it up. She made her biscuits in it over the campfire, and you never ate such biscuits. There was a hot cake griddle, skillets, coffee pot, and such. She had a lovely feather bed and homemade quilts. We all slept in that little space that was in the center between the cupboards. A wagon is not too awfully wide, either. On that trip, we did what many a person couldn't say they'd done. They're so fussy about water nowadays. We took a cup and reached into a foot track. It had rained pretty hard in this one area, and cattle had crossed there. And where they stepped down kind of deep, it was nothing at all to dip in and get a drink. When you're out of water, wet is wet. One time, we crossed, I think Mother called it the Little Missouri River. It was in the spring, and it was pretty swollen. The horses had to swim some before they got to the edge. When they went to pull up out of there onto the bank, us girls rolled right down and hit the tailgate of the wagon. Mother thought out we went to drown. It was just the noise of a heavy chain from the outside hitting the back end. It held, of course, but she just about had a heart attack. When the DeLongs finally reached their destination, a great disappointment awaited them. They had traveled that great distance on the strength of an advertisement for a new town. This is how Irma remembers it. They had advertised for carpenters to make a town. You had to have $2,000 cash, or the equivalent of it. Father, didn't have that much. I think it was $500. He figured with that fine team and wagon of his tools, he made up more than $2,000. They didn't want a bunch of poor people coming in there. After we got to the town, they had decided to change their minds. They didn't make the town, so there's nothing to do but turn around and go back. The DeLongs headed north to Sheridan, Wyoming, where John DeLong worked briefly as a carpenter. From Sheridan, they went to Brodus, Montana, to join Lotta's parents and siblings. My father put in for a homestead out of Brodus, where my grandparents' ranch was. My mother's brothers and sisters, all of them, was living right in the same area. Father went to a land office and made out the papers for the homestead. come home, and Mother's brothers helped him get the logs out and make it. I have a picture of the house they built. We wintered in it, and the next spring along came a man, and he said, "What are you folks doing here?" "Why," my father said, "this is my homestead. We built the house and wintered here." "Well, I'm sorry," he said, "but you're on my land." And my father says, "All right, where did you put in for yours?" And I think they said it was some 20 or 30 miles away at another land office. So to prove the thing, they got over to the land office, and they got the timing, because it was put down right to the minute when you signed the paper, and when they got the timing at that other one. 3 hours difference. And it was his land. We had to pick up and leave, go someplace. There was no more land right around there. It was a family thing. We had our house to live in, but we all worked together. We all shared our food. Food and some clothes was all you thought of anyhow. After the homestead, we went down eastward from Sheridan, Wyoming. Got an 80-acre place there, 13 miles out of Arvada. It would get so hot in summertime. And of course, we'd go barefoot. It'd feel like it was burning your feet on the floor in the house. Right after breakfast, my mother and sisters and we'd plan what we was going to have for lunch, and we'd hurry up and fix it. Take it down to the root cellar. We'd spend the whole day down there. They crocheted, and I played with frogs. I diapered them and everything. They reminded me of a little child. When I lay them down to put their diapers on, they just lay there and let me do it. They just lay there and let me do it. I had more fun with my little frogs. I have to admit, I've done and thought of all kinds of things, but diapering little frogs is a new one. And just when you think you've heard of everything, you learn that you can diaper frogs. Okay, here we go. Back on task. I never rode in a car once in the time we lived there near Arvada. Oh, if us kids didn't look forward to the day when it was time to go to town. I don't recall ever going to town in the winter time. It'd always be so cold. But in the summertime, my mother drove the team, and we went in the wagon to town. Oh boy, you'd get a few sticks of candy, little odds and ends like that. We sent to the catalog for things. Practically everything you got out of catalogs. I never will forget. There in the post office in town, some new shoes for me. Oh, those leather shoes. You know what new leather smells like? That was the best perfume. I'd ever smelled. As we went along, every few minutes, I'd take them out. Oh, put them on, look them over, then put them back in the box. That was my fun. All the way home. Of course, you never wore them around the house. You only wore them when you went somewhere. Set 'em on a shelf. I'd pert near where I'm out taking 'em down to smell 'em. The things that would please a child then, they wouldn't even think of today. We went out to Washington after the hard winter, 1918, going into 19. It ruined the Gear family's big cattle business. They died like flies. There was nothing for them to eat. They couldn't afford hay. That old swamp hay that they was bringing in from North Dakota was all there was to be had, and we couldn't afford it. Cattle wasn't worth enough. They saved a few, but it was nothing but a handful. It was over 300 head that they had always run. It broke their hearts. They sold out to a neighbor their land and their cattle, their equipment and everything. They just pulled out. The boys spread out wherever they could find work. The grandparents went out too. It was a ways from Seattle, but in that general area. They wrote back and says, "Say, there's fruit picking and things to make a living out of here. You better, any of you that want something to do, come." My mother and her sister and us two girls, we went out there. My dad didn't come right then. He wanted to see whether we just ended up a visit or what. We got in right at raspberry time, and then it went to cherry picking. Us kids would do whatever the grown-ups was doing. It felt so funny to be making some money. When it came fall, we went down to Vancouver, that one across from Portland. They had this big Del Monte plant that canned every type of fruit, vegetable, anything in season, and they got on there. I was 8.5, and Mother showed me how I could boil spuds or fry 'em. Usually it was boil. Then when they came home to lunch, nearly always it was hamburger. That was the quickest thing. That or bacon. Something on that order to fix real quick. By that time we had tent houses that we lived in. In the Aravada segment, Irma tells a story about Pete, a little orphaned chicken. The little girl who was on her own day after day in the Vancouver tent village must have had empathy for Petey, a tiny guy having to babysit himself. So Pete or Petey? I'm gonna probably lean into Petey. Down there out of Aravada was a place where the road went right through a man's barn lot. You had to open the gate, go through it, then open another. This one day there was a poor little chicken, and he couldn't keep up with Mama for the reason that he'd gotten into some horsehair, and it had wound around and made hobbles of his little feet. Mother went to the house to tell him about it. There was not a soul nowhere, at the barns or anywhere, so we took the little orphan home with us instead. We got that old hair off. We named him Petey, and he was a spoiled child. He lived right in the house with us. He's one of us. We didn't put him in a cage, put him in a box for the night. But in the daytime, I never will forget this one time we was doing things outside, and had just left him there in the house, and he jumped upon the table. To this good day, I do what my mother did. On my table, here's salt and sugar and everything. Sugar bowl sitting there. It was quite a big one. He jumped upon the table, and the highest thing he found was the sugar bowl. When we come in, he was perched there on the edge. He wasn't even half grown, just a teeny guy yet, having to babysit himself. Oh, kid, such funny things. All right, and the next lady here on page 303, Madge Switzer Walker. Madge Switzer Walker was born in Montana in 1891. Her paternal grandparents, Andrew and Elizabeth Switzer, were early pioneers who settled in the Madison Valley in 1865, 1 year after the region was organized as the Montana Territory, 24 years before Montana entered the Union as the 41st state in 1889. The recollections in this account are from Madge's first 11 years, when the family lived in the small town of Jeffers, Montana. My grandparents, Andrew and Elizabeth Switzer, came from Victor, Iowa, and that's in Polshik County, in the southeastern corner of the state. They started with 4 oxen and 3 covered wagons. Grandpa Switzer had 1 wagon. Malpheus Switzer, Grandpa's brother, rode horseback along beside them. Law, another relative, had the 2nd wagon. I can't remember about the 3rd wagon. They left Iowa the 1st of May, 1865, and they got to Virginia City September 30th. They came to the Madison Valley the next day, October 1st. That was 5 months. Grandma had a girl, 10, and a girl, 8. My dad was a year and a half, and she had a 6 weeks old baby. She was afraid to go into a dark room. Think what she must have suffered. It must have been terrible, and she didn't want to come. When they left Iowa, she went over to the railroad, a little ways from their farm, and rode for 7 miles. I think she thought that would be the last time she'd ever see a railroad. When they got to the Platte River, she and Aunt Ellen cut their hair off. They had long hair, and it was just too much trouble. So they cut it all off and laid it across the stump. They said, "Now they'll think we've been scalped." Grandma Switzer told me a story about an Indian, Nez Percy, were coming through the valley. They had their women and children with them, but this young fellow came to her house. It was a 1-room cabin with 1 window, 1 door, and she was washing on the board in the tub. The Indian, she was afraid of him, took out his knife. The children were crying. She was afraid she was going to be scalped. He sharpened the knife on a rock. Then he pulled a hair out of his head and cut it to see if it was sharp. Now she was really scared. I said, "What did you do?" And she said, "I washed as hard as I could." The Indian took a turnip out of his pocket and peeled it. She thought how foolish she was to have been afraid. The Nez Percy were traveling with their women and children. They wouldn't be on the warpath, and they wouldn't be up to any mischief. She was just so frightened. And she had those little children. Well, my goodness. What do we know about hard times? Grandpa Switzer had a herd of purebred brown Swiss cows, first in the valley. He milked about a dozen cows. I don't think Grandma ever milked. He brought the milk in. She put it in pans, tin pans, about that big around indicates a sizable pan. He'd built her a rack that let these pans fit in. She'd leave the milk till the next day. Then she'd take the cream off the top. By that time it was stiff. You could almost lift it up. She skimmed the cream and made butter. She used the skim milk to make cottage cheese. Grandma made butter in a barrel churn. That's the kind that goes around and turns over. She turned it with the handle over and over. She put her butter in 2-pound wooden molds and sold it for 25 cents a pound. To make cottage cheese, she put the milk on the back of the stove in a fair-sized vessel, a kettle, and left it there overnight. By morning it would have clabbered. Then she put it in a cheesecloth bag and drained it. The curds were pretty hard and small. Later on, they got a separator, and that was quite a something. We would have that separated cream on fresh currants. The cream was, it was too rich. The separator was an innovation. It was an iron rack, and there was a bowl at the top of it with 24 discs that dipped into the bowl. You'd crank until you got it to the point where it didn't whine. You could tell by the sound of it if you were going fast enough. It separated the cream from the milk. Centrifugal, you see. The cream went to the outside, the skim milk went to the inside. There were 2 spouts, one for the skim milk and one for the cream. It could be adjusted so the cream was very thick or very thin. Grandma was a persevering woman. She raised chickens, sold cottage cheese, butter, and eggs. She put her girls through a school for young ladies in Virginia City. She didn't bother about the boy. My dad probably went to school 6 months in his life, but he was a pretty smart man. I remember once I was just a little thing going down to Grandma Switzer's house. When I got there, she had taken baby chickens away from a setting hen. She had them in a basket and she let me look at them. Oh, they were cunning, just little puffs. I covered them up carefully, too carefully. When she uncovered them, they were all dead. Those chickens meant something to her. They were dollars and cents, as well as being sorry for the chickens. But she didn't scold me. She didn't say a word. At Grandma Switzer's, they didn't eat in the kitchen. They had a dining room. This was a large house, built after the one-room log cabin. And sometimes they didn't have enough chairs to go around, so they sat on boxes and tree stumps. Her kitchen had a wood stove with a reservoir in the back and a big oven. She made loaves and loaves and loaves of bread and cookies. She made lots of cookies. In the fall, when she had eggs and butter and cream, they were raised sugar cookies, about 2 inches across, and they puffed up in the middle. She put them in a barrel and they lasted through the winter. When I was about 6, there was a general store in Jeffers, Montana. I can remember a barrel of ginger snaps, and I remember a knife they used to cut tobacco. They had a wheel of cheese with a glass cover and a knife inside that worked on a pivot. There were oyster crackers in one barrel, dill pickles in another. You just dipped in and got you some pickles. The barrel that had the ginger snaps was open to the public and to the flies. How did we live? And we thrived. The other side of the store was dry goods, bolts of cloth, needles, pins, thread, and lace. I remember going to Virginia City one time in a horse and buggy with my mother and my grandmother. Just the 3 of us went. Grandma was quite a hand to sing. They sang, "Fling out the banner far and wide." I sat down in the bottom of the buggy, right at their feet. I think it was Nell we drove. She was a gray mare. Excuse me. We started early in the morning, and we didn't get home till late at night. We bought a rocking chair for me, and where that rocking chair went, I don't know. In spite of wartime scarcity, gasoline came thanks to coupons he had saved. I had just finished 7th grade. Shiras had resigned from the Foreign Service, and we were on our way to the ranch he and Mother had bought in southern Arizona, partly to be nearer her parents, who lived in Tucson, partly because it would be good for the children, and partly, I suspect, because my father liked to do the unpredictable. Uncle Bill was to be my father's partner and his first instructor in ranch management. Uncle Bill had grown up in Canada, had gone to the University of Arizona College of Agriculture, and had married my mother's younger sister. He had managed a number of ranger stations around the state when he and my father agreed to join in a ranching venture. Uncle Bill had stalked the AA with Hereford bulls and half-wild cows from Mexico and experiment in bargain breeding with limited success. Shiras spent years rounding up and the last of those Mexican cows. The AA is one of the older ranches in that part of Arizona. Where we were to live was in the center of its 2 sections, divided by a fence that pastured cattle in the northern half in summer and in the lower southern canyons in the winter. Near the house was a sandstone dam. This was in the midst of sandstone quarry country that was said to be one of the first dams for miles around and reputed never to have gone dry. The house consisted of 2 rooms of hand-cut sandstone that we used as living room and bedroom, with windowsills more than a foot deep. Attached was a frame kitchen, a shack, really, moved from the other side of the dam. The house had 6 doors to the outside. Shiras replaced one with a window and built on a large room with a fireplace as a bedroom for my mother and himself. The 2 boys had the sandstone bedroom, and my sister and I the separate frame bunkhouse with a tin roof. Truly alarming during thunderstorms. Juniper trees grew everywhere. They were considered weeds, destroying range land, and particularly enormous ones brooded over and cooled the house. The house faced south to the road that led 18 miles to Williams, and back to the north was the spillway from the dam and the ravine with cliffs and grapevines and Indian petroglyphs scratched on sandstone slabs. Across the dam rose Home Again Mountain, for when we saw its volcanic palisades, we knew we were home again. All right. ... and I've got to get a little bit of moisture. All right, we're on page 309. And these are separated by ... And there's another 3 pages of them. So thank you for being with me. I appreciate you. Little by little, things did get fixed. I helped paint the rooms, all of them white. The furniture from our parents' foreign service life may have looked odd in this little rural setting, but to us it made things home. The curved sideboard with a sheet of glass on top, my father's Victrola from his room at college, the wing chair, the desk with the secret drawer, postage stamps were kept there, the smooth, curved, rather Art Deco bedstead, the spool beds. All these had been shipped during the war from the last post in Montevideo. Montevideo? It's probably not right. Mother loved this furniture and the houses. I think where it had stood, and she dusted and polished and cared for it as best she could in the heat and grit of the ranch. Outside along the front of the house, we built a low wall of sandstone blocks from a shed that had been taken down. Each of us assigned a daily quota of stones to carry. Mother planted zinnias along the wall, and for years we hauled buckets of water to them in the evening. A hop vine clung, improbably, to the kitchen overhang and thrived on dousings of dishwater. More sandstone slabs went to a terrace against the north side, the coolest place in the summer, with a Virginia creeper that spread bravely against the stone house. I'd sit on the steps to read by the last of the evening light. There was even a swing from a branch of the juniper tree against the kitchen. The bunkhouse we whitewashed. You could see through the knotholes and between some of the better warped boards. And we decorated the four corners of the roof with deer antlers, pagoda-like. Against the side that faced the house, we hung an elegantly bleached horned cow skull. Though the house was the main thing for us children and for my mother, of course, there was more. There was the barn, for one. Hay, tools, odd bits of machinery, saddles, and the sign on the door from the Department of Labor, Aviso a los empleados. Notice to employees. Warning against industrial accidents in 2 languages. Log corrals, the uneven sides much higher than we were, looped against the back side of the barn, where children could sit on the top rails watching a branding, a butchering, or a corral full of frantic wild horses that had been rounded up in the canyons. Behind the barn, I milked the domesticated range milk cow, Antilles, her offspring in successive years, named Lesser Antilles. I had learned to milk goats on my grandmother's farm in New Hampshire, where we had been sent in the summers to relive my okay, hang on. Let's try this again. It's a little bit chilly. All right. I had learned to milk goats on my grandmother's farm in New Hampshire, where we had been sent in the summers to relieve my mother of us for a few weeks. And as I was the only member of the family who knew how to milk, I set myself up on one side of the cow with a bucket, and Lesser Antilles provided competition on the other. As often as Antilles did not knock me or the bucket over, we had a quart or so of milk a day. Mother sometimes even coaxed butter out of a small glass churn from Sears. But she put her foot down about chickens. They were noisy and dirty and stupid, and a tyranny, because once you started, you could never leave the premises. She would not have them. Horses were indispensable to the work of the ranch, and I became not able to imagine a horse existing except to work. Our horses were fairly ordinary range animals. A brown and white spotted one my father liked to ride had been poisoned by loco weed and would tear off through the brush when a fit struck. A steadier horse, Mutt, was considered safe enough for the children. He was old and came with the ranch. Mutt had been a first-rate cow horse, and by the time he was relegated to carrying me around, had a lot to teach. I was allowed to ride with the men, which meant starting early in the morning before it got hot, and riding until mid-afternoon when it was very hot. We'd move cattle from one watering place to another, or gather calves for branding, or check fences, or when my father replaced the original herd of Mexican cows with more conventional Herefords, stalk and cokes, and sometimes wildly chase long-legged, long-necked, aging cows, no longer encumbered by calves up and down rocky canyon sides, but never flagged, even though I might have. Dot, dot, dot. The ranch also meant the men who worked there. The double A was of a size to need 2 men and 2 or 3 more at roundups. These usually recruited in a quick tour of the bars in Williams and Ashford. But to hire his full-time assistant, my father took great care. He found Richard Bargeman. We children called him always Mr. Bargeman, who had developed cowboying to an elegant profession. He was soft-spoken and kindly and infinitely patient with animals. A small house was built for him and his wife, Leona, and 2 little girls lived there. Before coming to the double A, he had been an agent on the Navajo reservation, and Leona, a nurse at the government hospital in Cayanita. He spoke Navajo and taught us to count to 10. Mr. Bargeman was doubtless bemused by the vagaries of our family. Before his own house was built and his family joined him, he ate meals with us. He and my father in opposite ends of the table in the kitchen. Mother and I sat on one side, Charlie and Fifi on a bench against the wall, and Pancho on my father's lap, eating off of his plate. Mr. Bargeman was full of stories about a roundup of wild cattle that had lasted for years on a ranch called the Hash Knife. These tales, their names of places and people, took on the quality of mythology. It was from Richard Bargeman that Shiras learned how to work a ranch, and learned also what he did not have to know how to do. He never roped. Roping was skilled and delicate work. It also was very competitive among those who did it well, and could be dangerous for those who did not. So he wisely left roping to Mr. Bargeman, who even enjoyed goat roping competitions in town on Sunday afternoons. It was Mr. Bargeman who found a young quarter-horse mare for me and brought her home without my parents really deciding whether or not I should have more than a child's horse. She was named Coco. Mr. Bargeman broke her before I got home from school for the summer, but he never persuaded her to give up bucking. So my riding days often included tempestuous dumpings on the rocks. His professionalism about cowboying was wonderful to watch, and I wanted to see it all. We'd talk about what a real Western movie might be if anyone bothered to describe the truth, how close to move behind a cow and a calf, how to know if your horse was getting tired, and mostly how to watch and listen and see signs of what animals had gone through the brush and how long ago. Day after day I rode with him, sometimes entire days with hardly any conversation. ... I learned to sew those summers, but because yard goods were hard to come by in the last years of the war, Mother and I cut up outgrown dresses and pieced them into blouses. We also became inventive with flour and sugar sacks. And one year, I fashioned Shiras and Mr. Bargeman each a flour sack suit in a vaguely imitated cutaway design to be worn at one celebration or other of family invention. One such event was graduation from Calvert School. Charlie and I were sent away to school during the years at the ranch, but Fifi and Pancho learned at home with correspondence courses from the Calvert School of Baltimore, Maryland, until they went to the Verde Valley School in Sedona, Arizona. Fifi joined Verde's Valley's first class, which helped construct the building and plan the school. ... For me, in what were supposed to be the terrible teenage years, the ranch was wonderful. To be sure, there were hot, desperate, long afternoons of boredom when I stretched out on the bed and read all of Galsworthy's 3 trilogies in a single summer. My grandfather had ridden horseback with John Galsworthy when Galsworthy was on a lecture tour to the United States and found himself in Tucson. Galsworthy's thank you note is tucked in a book of short stories. I read the miscellaneous collections of books my father's mother sent from Brentano's at Christmas. A critical biography of Sidney Lanier, the letters from Jane McComb and her brother, Benjamin Franklin, histories of the cowboy, a book about Traveler, reputedly the first quarter horse who had drawn milk wagons somewhere in New York State. In college, these books made my reputation as a near prodigy of the obscure. I sewed and did algebra by correspondence, and in the bunkhouse learned to play the recorder to myself. I, being the single non-musical member of the family who was begged not to sing. More often, I was out of doors, and whether working or hanging around afterwards, I found a great deal to watch and listen to. Caro, Jim, lived in a covered truck and would ask my father every few months to bring him a gallon can of Caro syrup, hence our name for him. Jim Bennett was a small, bow-legged man who one thought of as very old until he began speaking of his mother, whom he supported and visited often. Jim Bennett had swum the Rio Grande when he was 8 years old, driving cattle with his father to Denver, and he had worked cattle ever since. All the cowboys deferred to him. His tales inevitably were cautionary, ending with Jim's tilting the back of his hat brim forward and saying, "I could have told 'em, and I did tell 'em," implying too few took to heart what he had told them, to their loss. He went to work on a large ranch owned by people my parents knew, where the Duke and Duchess of Windsor were entertained on their American visit. To show the royals a real cowboy, Jim was brought out and introduced. "Jim, this is the Duke and Duchess of Windsor." "Who?" Jim Bennett asked in a loud drawl. ... All right. ... Indeed, I realized at the double A that people living in a place could form their identities in it. They could make themselves part of that place. I longed to participate in such alchemy, to belong, in some secret way, to the mountains and canyons and small towns of northern Arizona. Some of Mr. Bargeman's relatives worked on the Santa Fe Railroad, and when I'd heard them list section houses along the line, it was as though these residents were joined into the names. Such intimacy was exotic to me, seductive, but it did not take me long to realize I was not likely to achieve it. Nothing in my past had allowed such connections. The Foreign Service life did not permit very long residence anywhere. And in addition, I knew that while the consular service in Stuttgart had provided me with papers alleging I had been born on American soil, it was no soil to stand upon. Yet those are merely happenstances, and even I could tell that belonging to a place had to be a deeper phenomenon. ... I find myself now, after 20-some years of living in the same house in the Grand Forks and teaching in the same English department at the University of North Dakota, longer than I have ever lived in any one place. 5 children have grown and left home, and 30 years of marriage to my husband Richard have not matched this semblance of permanence. Right now, it suits me well to be a stranger, puzzling my way among a society that looks fixed and of long habit, with the stranger's privilege of exploring other people's haunts and permission to be inept. North Dakota, lost at the top of the map, is a state that no one even wants to drive through if they can help it. Nevertheless, I prize living there. I have built friendships and enough familiarity with the state that I look forward to returning. Yet for now, it is a relief to be obviously from away. Even living in someone else's house makes me feel at home. ... Thus, to be from somewhere I have supposed must be a gift, like the ability to carry a tune that comes irrespective of class, educational experience, or whether one moves often or travels. It is not particularly connected to knowing the history, the topography, or the origin of place names, but comes, it is my guess, with a kinetic sense of space. In North Dakota, people identify not the town they live in or near, but name the country. In Uruguay, people locate a school, a town, or their bus stop at the kilometer marker on the highway radiating from Montevideo, where at the Capitol building begins kilometer 0. To such a method of thinking, other kinds of place name information must seem arcane. In North Dakota, I have yet to find anyone among classrooms of students or audiences in other towns I might be talking to who knows the origin of the name of the town of Carpio. But even as people smile while I tell them, according to a WPA state guide, the first post office was in a railway car, so one went to the car P.O. They know that they are in the ones from North Dakota, and I am not. That's funny. ... 2 left. But certain regions attract me strongly. Others I resist living in. The West draws me. The ranch in northern Arizona and Flagstaff, where I went to college. Montana and Washington, that gave me graduate school. And North Dakota, where I feel I thrive now. To the East and Midwest, I sense little connection. The New England landscape is beautiful, but my grandmother was too stern and dour for me to want to linger. The Hudson River Valley, where the boarding school was located in the 1940s, was tree-filled, but I desperately resisted being at that school. And the agricultural Midwest, the much-sung heartland of America, sunk me into a faculty wifery. I felt alien to those parts. This attraction toward or alienation from places is certainly colored not only by topography and landscape, but by the people or events associated with a place. One's sense of place, I would assume, is inevitably confounded or enriched, or at least complicated, by whatever social situations or elements of personal affection happen to go with it. For me, the Mississippi River makes none too removed a boundary from territories I do not really want to inhabit again if I can help it. And the last one, ... I expect one's sense of place is deeply psychic. I doubt we are moved by or drawn to mountains, deserts, rivers, woodlands, coastlines, or amber waves of grain alone and in a vacuum, but imperceptibly respond to them in combination with whatever human circumstances connect us to them. Hardly anything can be more lovely than the New England landscape. The view from the almost secret lookout beyond the lawn of Dingleton, New Hampshire, could grace a Christmas card. Yet the briefest visit east of the Hudson renews my conviction that that is where medieval monsters lie. It's a lot of words. The further reading is Elizabeth Hampton. Read This Only to Yourself. Writings of Midwestern Women from 1880 to 1910. She wrote that in 1982. Elizabeth Hampton, the co-editor for Far From Home, Families of the Westward Migration, 1989, and Settlers, Children, Growing Up on the Great Plains in 1991. So I'm going to stop there to being about talked out. See, when I get here and read early, I don't have to talk as much the rest of the day. Well, use up some of my lady words. Keep my mouth shut. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple of things here. All right. Oh, Lordy. That was not it. Okay, do you see here? These are ... And so what's happening is we're like skipping around, and so we're reading different parts. So when I say the ... what we've done is just... Oh, let me scare the bird off. All right, so one more shot of what the book looks like, my friends. Western Women's Reader. Thank you for being with me. I have enjoyed every story that I have read to you. I I think it might be changing my life, actually. Just saying. It feels like, if you know me, then you've had to hear this silly story, so I'm going to throw it in on this video, which is whenever I'm driving around, the reason that I don't suffer with any kind of road rage or outrageous driving issues is because I'm always so thankful that I'm, 1, not in a horse and buggy, 2, not on a horse, and 3, not walking. So reading about the horse and the wagon and stuff makes me giggle because of how often I run those 3 little things through my mind, which is, I see that this is going to take me longer, but you know what? I'm not on a horse. I'm not in a horse and buggy, so it's like, it's very interesting to read about them when it's something that I kind of use very regularly to be appreciative and thankful for being able to drive rather than what's happening. Why are these people doing this? How come they don't know how a stop sign works? You know, that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, if I was on a horse and I was headed to this place, then I'd have to have packed a bag and I would need to stay the night wherever I was going. Same idea with the wagon. So, an absolute worst case scenario is that you're walking, you know, like the horse is awesome and the wagon is even better. You know, it's like, it's getting better, but you're lucky to be in a car driving is how I usually feel about it. I am extremely grateful and appreciative to be, you know, not on a horse or in a covered wagon at all. Like, not even for fun. Like, hey, let's go spend the night in a covered wagon. I think not. Ew. Probably an idea somebody would like. Thank you for being with me today. I appreciate you. I will keep reading as soon as I can because I am excited to know what the ladies from 300 years ago are doing. I appreciate you.